Hey all, today we are covering the trial of the decade probably, the Alec Murdaugh case. And if you've already heard the details, well, guess what? The trial is over now, so we're bringing you all the fresh new bits and pieces. So stick around and listen to this wild Southern crime.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to a brand new episode of Southern Woke. If you're new, welcome. If you're not, welcome back. I'm Kalan.
And I'm Marena.
And y'all, today we are talking about the Murdaugh murders.
Oh yes. Man, this story is so entangled. There's so many webs of just deceit and lying and craziness. Y'all better buckle the hell up.
And let me just give y'all a disclaimer. So while we were researching for this, Marena texted me and was like, this is going to be another episode that fires us up where we're just pissed the entire episode. And I agree, because there's some things that happened here that never, ever, ever should have happened. And just whenever you think it's getting crazy, it just gets crazier and crazier and crazier.
Yeah, and what really makes me mad is the law enforcement in this story. Like, it's a story about just, like, the law enforcement being bought over and, like, covering up for a family. Like, what the hell, man? You're supposed to not do that. Period. But you'll hear all about it. So, I guess we should introduce the family in case you've been living under a rock. The Murdock family is a very well-known family in the Hampton, South Carolina area, and today's story centers around Alec Murdaugh, his wife Maggie, and their two boys, Buster and Paul. Alec Murdaugh was, for many years, a litigation attorney working at his family law firm in Hampton, South Carolina. His dad, his grandpa, his great-grandpa, his great-great-grandpa, they were all prosecutors that have worked there in the same town for over a century at this point. When Alec was in law school, he met Margaret, or Maggie Brandsetter, and eventually married her. And together they had their two sons, Buster and then Paul. And together they were living the good life, the sweet life of the Murdaughs, if you will.
I kind of hate that you just said that. I was getting like Sweet Life of Zack and Cody vibes, and it just became Sweet Life of the Murdaughs. Ugh.
Yeah, totally different story. But they had their regular home. They had a hunting lodge. And bruh, this hunting lodge, did you see how big of a land that was? Like, someone said it was like 1,000 acres. And they had like multiple little like log cabins on there with like a main house. And then they had the access to the river and they had their boats. They would hunt on the land, fish on the land. They had a whole kennel full of dogs to, I don't even know, like hunt things down.
When I was watching that, they were like, yeah, and they have their kennels because Paul was a huge fan of, was it hog hunting or something like that?
Yeah.
But anyway, he needed dogs for it, and they like did this shot where they panned past all the dogs, and there was like 10 plus dogs there.
Yeah, living their life in like a kennel.
Living their life in a kennel. Also, like, who's feeding them? And like, what? Like, I mean, I'm sure they're getting fed, but there's no way like adequate time is being spent with those dogs.
Oh yeah, they had multiple people probably working on the land. I know of at least one caretaker they had, but they even had a plane in a landing strip.
They had a landing strip on their freaking property, y'all. It was insane. Like, they would just fly the plane around and then land back.
Rich motherfuckers.
They were rich, but they were, like, southern rich. Like, you're not thinking, like, oh, they're driving around in, like, these insane, like, Lamborghinis and living in these huge apartments. That's, like, they have their life made out in the South where they get to do all the fun southern things they want to do and have all the fun southern toys, like that type of rich.
Yeah, like their nice cars was like the chromed out F-150s, you know?
Exactly.
So The whole community knew who they were, and their name carried a heck of a lot of status to it. But as we'll see, that definitely went to their head. Alex's 2 boys were known to be like mega spoiled rotten. They knew their family was important, and they got away with so much. And I don't know, but it just seems like they're the type of guys that are little jerks, and they're getting away with shit that they shouldn't, and they know it.
You could see just like the looks on their faces in so many of the pictures that they had a sense of entitlement.
Yeah. And also, this family probably wins second place behind the Kardashians for making headlines at this point. The first major story to hit the news involved Paul. So let's get a good understanding of the whole situation, shall we? So Paul had his group of friends that consisted of his girlfriend Morgan, her 2 best friends Miley and Mallory, and their boyfriends Connor and Anthony, who were also like cousins. Paul and Morgan met in history class in high school, and she was drawn to his playful personality, and they officially began dating her junior year, becoming Paul's very first girlfriend. Paul was that boyfriend that had the posters asking her to the dances and extravagant gifts on the holidays. And in the Netflix docuseries on this whole situation, Morgan tells a story of when the city would have their annual watermelon festival, and Alec would let the kids into the back door of the law firm and offer them all kinds of alcohol. Get them drunk as heck. And the Murdocks as a family, they drank a lot. A lot.
A lot is an understatement.
Mm-hmm. Now, when Paul would get drunk, if you've seen any of the videos, he became a different person. It would change his whole demeanor, and they even gave his drunk alter ego the nickname of Timmy. He would go from his friendly, funny, normal self, and after a few drinks, he became stubborn and would do this weird tense up thing with his hands, and his eyes would seem as if he was looking straight through you. And according to Anthony, his friend, people would think that Paul seemed evil when he became Timmy, but Anthony said he was just trying super hard to narrow in and understand what you were saying because he was just so drunk. So Morgan would try and tell Maggie, their mom, on a few occasions that Paul was maybe drinking too much, but she would just blow it off. Oh, he's just my son. He's just having fun. Blah, blah, blah. Let him live. Maggie always seemed like she favored Buster more than Paul because Buster went to college, he joined a fraternity, he's going to law school, and he wanted to be just like his dad in the line of men before him. But Paul didn't want that, so maybe Maggie just put him on the back burner, and he felt that. Morgan says Paul probably felt like the black sheep of the family. And the family had a nanny and a housekeeper named Miss Gloria, and she was more like a mom to Paul than Maggie ever was, and she basically raised him. She would have done anything for him.
I would die for Gloria. She seemed like the sweetest soul.
I know. And Paul also confided in his grandpa Randolph a lot, and anytime he got in trouble, he would call his grandpa, who would then call Alex, and they would work up some story, and all of Paul's troubles would go away. Now, Mallory, Anthony's girlfriend, got along with Paul, but Miley couldn't stand him. Morgan told a story where in 2017 they were leaving a Christmas party, and Paul was super drunk, so she went to go drive them home. And he told her, get out the driver's seat, and then they got into a fight, and he was being really aggressive about it. He won the argument and was driving them home when he ended up losing control of the vehicle and wrecked them into a ditch. The truck was sideways, and he had lots of guns in his truck that had flown everywhere along with empty beer cans. So Morgan does the logical thing and dials 911, and then Paul hangs up the phone and throws it. He then proceeds to get on the phone with his grandpa and told him exactly where they were at, and then his grandpa called Alex. So eventually, a few minutes later, Randolph, Alec, and Maggie all showed up to the scene, and before even checking on them to see if they were, physically okay, they just started taking all the guns and beer cans out the truck. And then they asked them, "Did you call 911?" And Morgan said, "Yeah." And they said, "Why would you do that? You could have gotten our son in trouble."
They seriously, got pissed at her. Paul flipped the truck with her inside of it, could have killed her. And then she calls 911 as any normal person would do. And then they get pissed at her. That made me so furious. That's what y'all care about in that moment?
Exactly. Their priorities are so backwards. So, if you couldn't tell by this point, Morgan and Paul's relationship became really toxic. He would break up with her, then want her back, and even got physical with her multiple times. Gloria would even try and give Morgan advice and say things like, "If it's going to hurt you more to stay with him, then you should leave him." Well, here comes February 23rd of 2019. The group of friends was invited to an oyster roast, and at first, Anthony didn't even want to go, but Mallory was giving him the puppy dog eyes, and eventually he caved. And Paul and Morgan weren't together at the time, but he was texting her, telling her that her friends were going and that she needed to be with him. Bruh, stop trying to control her.
Morgan and Paul had one of those relationships where, he would break up with her just for the weekend and get back together with her. We all know those couples that are just constantly on and off like that. That was the type of relationship that they had. Oh, yeah.
So, eventually, all three couples ended up going. And instead of driving, they took Paul's boat down Beaufort River. They stopped at a dock and everyone started drinking and Paul was funneling beer. Then they got back on the boat to go to the oyster roast. As it got later and colder in the night, several people were telling them maybe it's not a good idea to take the boat back home, and many people offered to drive them home. But Paul was too drunk and stubborn, to hear any of it. They all ended up leaving around midnight in the boat. Connor and Miley had gotten into an argument because Connor and Paul wanted to stop at Luther's bar on the way back, and the girls just wanted to go home. They got to the bar around 12:55 that night, and Paul and Connor went and drank while Miley and Morgan stayed on the pier, and Mallory and Anthony were just kind of walking around the dock. When Paul came back from the bar, he was acting like Timmy again. And all the friends were trying to tell him that Connor or Anthony should drive the boat, but of course he wouldn't listen. And there's that video footage where it's Mallory's last time that she's ever seen alive. And they're all on the pier about to get back onto the boat. And it's so sad and it gives me chills because they all, except for Paul, look so just happy and innocent, having no idea what's about to happen.
And then you see Paul, and he is the most visible drunk walk that you've ever seen. That guy that you see stumbling around outside of the bar and you're just avoiding him at all costs. It was that exact walk.
Yep, the legs crisscross, and he had the tense hands. I think they said he flipped the chair on the side just because it was there.
And have you ever been out with your friends and you're just so ready to go home and it's really late and there's that one person that just is very drunk and wants to go to another bar? And I've had friends like that before. I'm guaranteed that's the situation that was happening here. Absolutely.
And before they got on the boat, they talked about taking an Uber, but Paul didn't trust leaving his boat there at the dock at the bar. And no one wanted to leave anyone behind. So they all got back on the boat with Paul to go home, and they left at 1:17 a.m. Morgan said the way he was driving was terrifying, and he would go around in circles, and at times he would leave the wheel unattended. At one point, Miley told Paul, "If you're gonna drive the boat, then just take us home." And he got in her face and said, "You need to shut the F up and sit down." And at this point, Anthony is pissed, and everyone is yelling. Paul was yelling at Morgan saying, "Why don't you have my back?" And she was like, "Why would I? You're screaming at us and not making any sense." And then he looked at her and said, "You know what's crazy? your father not making enough money to support your family. Like the fuck?
When I heard that, I had to like re-listen to it because I was like, there's no way that just came out of that kid's mouth.
Like, okay, Paul, because you're out there making so much money for your family. Like,
seriously, and like just because he was born into this super wealthy family, like her family wasn't even like bad off. They just weren't super wealthy. Like, God.
Yeah, like
the ego of this family.
Her mom was like a prison nurse. Like, I would imagine she's making more money than you or I, at least. Like, they're doing okay for themselves. I don't remember what her dad did, but that's irrelevant.
And they also seem just like the coolest people.
Oh, yeah. All of these kids' parents, God bless their souls for everything they've gone through. They all seem so sweet. Well, okay. So after that statement that Paul said, Morgan started crying, and he continued screaming in her face, and then he slapped her. And Miley said that you could tell by the way that he did it that it wasn't the first time. And it was almost as if he was comfortable with doing it at this point. Then the boat went from being idle to the bow standing almost straight up, like as if you just floored the gas on the interstate or something. And even with the boat going full speed, Paul would leave the wheel unattended. So Connor would try and reach over and straighten out the wheel here and there. But they were like all so scared. Then they saw the bridge, and it looked like they were going to hit it. So they all began grabbing each other and kind of bracing themselves, and then bam. Everyone was screaming, and once Anthony and Miley kind of came out the water and realized what happened, they noticed that Mallory wasn't anywhere to be seen. And then they all started screaming for Mallory, and Anthony got back in the water and would go down and look for her as long as he could hold his breath. But it's the middle of the night, and it's dark outside, and they weren't having any luck finding her. And the water was flowing super fast. When Connor came to, he immediately called 911.
What bridge is it? Paul, what bridge is this? Paul, what bridge?
911, where's your emergency? Hello? Police, fire, EMS. Hello?
We're in a boat crash on Arthur Street.
Whereabouts on Arthur Street?
In Arthur Street, the only bridge on Arthur Street.
Archer Street?
Archer's Creek.
Archer's Creek. Archer's Creek. Is it? Okay. What's going on?
It's by Paris Island.
Right. What's going on?
We're in a boat crash.
You know what kind of a?
A boat crash.
A boat? Did you say a boat crash?
A boat crash.
Okay, so are you at the dock? Hello, are you at the dock?
No, we just crashed in a boat.
Okay, are you in the water or are you?
We're in the boat.
Okay.
We have someone missing.
Okay. Hang on 1 second.
So Anthony walked to the top of the bridge, and he saw the cops coming from both directions. Morgan was still sitting in the boat bleeding, and Paul was in his underwear? And his only concern was calling his grandpa. Meanwhile, he just injured all his friends and one is missing. And then once the cops were there, Paul went up to a cop and asked to use his phone, and the cop was like, I don't have it on me, and told Paul that he dropped his in the grass. And Anthony was yelling at him, saying, why are you effing smiling like this is funny? My effing girlfriend's gone. I hope you rot in hell. Like, I can't even imagine the emotions going on. And it took authorities 10 to 15 minutes to get Paul in an ambulance. And once they were on their way to the hospital, Paul called his grandpa and so nonchalantly said that they got in a boat accident and we can't find Mallory, and then proceeded to blame the whole thing on Connor. And Connor wanted to beat his ass, and probably would have done so had it not been for the injuries that he just received. And
the dude's whole, like, face was fractured. Like, his bottom teeth were pushed in front of his front teeth. Like, it was bad.
Yeah, and he had a huge gash on his chin.
And also, I want y'all to, like, understand, like, the impact of this boat accident. Like, it didn't just barely hit the thing. Like, they were thrown out of the boat. Like, I can't even remember which two of them, but two of them got completely flung out of the boat. Like, it was a hard impact.
Yeah. So Anthony stayed behind, even though something was wrong with his shoulder, and he called his parents crying, saying, "Y'all need to get here quick. We can't find Mallory." And they had the water search and rescue and the fire department out there searching all throughout the night. And get this, it wasn't until 4 a.m. that they called Mallory's mom, Renee, to let her know what had happened. And she immediately heads out there after calling Mallory's dad, because I think they were separated. And I just cannot believe that the cops didn't arrive on the scene, understand that, okay, we have Mallory missing. Someone needs to let her parents know. They let 3 hours go by before...
The cops actually never even called.
No.
It was one of the friends or one of the family members that ended up calling, but it never was, like, they said they never once heard a single thing from police, even, like, to this day. That was insane.
They don't ever call them. And that's pretty effed up. So back at the hospital, Morgan was getting her hands stitched up because they were all cut up and her skin was peeling back. And once her parents were there, one of the nurses said something like, "I shouldn't say this, but Paul is a nasty drunk and you need to get away from him as fast as you can." And then when they took Morgan for an x-ray, a different nurse took Morgan's mom to the side and said, "Nurse to nurse and mom to mom, you need to keep her away from him." And Morgan says she wasn't at the hospital 10 minutes before Officer Pritchard started asking questions. Then it didn't take long before Alec and Randolph showed up. The officer was trying to interview Paul, but Randolph was like, "No, you can't do that right now. He's too drunk." I believe his exact words were, "He's drunker than Cooter Brown," whatever that means.
Yeah, and there's a video clip of Alex showing up, and he's, like, doing this stupid, like, power walk thing, like, running through, like, immediately trying to take control of the situation. And they're in a hospital, like, in a chaotic situation where people are injured and dead, and it's crazy.
Connor didn't call his parents until he was at the hospital, and soon after his dad got off the phone with Connor, he gets a call from Alec and says Connor was the driver of the boat and that he was worried about not one tragedy, but two, meaning if Connor were to go to jail for this, but tells them not to fret, he can look out for Connor. And the nurses took Connor out of his room to get an x-ray of his jaw because he had a deep gash on the side of his chin and his teeth in his jaw were misaligned. And as they were wheeling him down the hall, Alex whispered in his ear and was like, "Just be quiet. Don't say anything. I got you." And Connor's parents show up and they want to get to their son because, hello, he just got in a boat accident, but they're bombarded by Alec and Randolph first. And then as Connor and his parents are back in their room, an officer comes in and was like, "You've been named as the driver of the boat." Like, I can't imagine how scary that must feel. Like, you so blatantly know, like, Paul is driving the boat, and immediately they're trying to pin this all on you. So, meanwhile, while that's going on, Morgan's getting surgery on her hand now, and Randolph went in her room and was just staring at her weirdly. And then Alex starts knocking on the door and says, "I need to get in there. I represent her," and was trying to say he was her acting guardian. And Morgan looked at the nurse and said, "Please keep that man out of my room." And then Miley's mom.
As she should. That made me so happy when she said that.
I know. Like, for so long, I bet you everyone in her life was just like, "Please get away from that family, please." And after this boat accident, like, she was like, "I'm done. I don't care anymore. It's for me now." Then eventually Miley's mom shows up at the hospital, and I don't think Miley had any injuries. Like, maybe she was scratched up, but there was nothing to, like, be worked on. But Randolph went to go speak to Miley's mom in the hallway, and Miley's mom asked him, is there any word on Mallory? And this bitch had the audacity to say, who are you talking about? And after she had to clarify that it was the girl that went missing in the boat accident, he said, oh, I'm pretty sure we know how that's going to end up. Like, heartless as hell. The fuck?
Like, who are you?
And so in the following days, poor Anthony did not give up staying by that river and hoping and praying they found her. When the girls got out the hospital, they went back to the bridge and they cried with Mallory's parents as they watched the search unfold. And then Mallory's mom wanted to see the boat where it all happened, but an officer was blocking off the area and said he had strict orders not to let anyone through. Then a few minutes later, they see Randolph and Maggie drive right on past the officer, and Alec's brother towed the boat out the water, aka the crime scene was removed.
And in no other case would that have ever been okay.
No.
Except for the super special treatment that this family got.
Whew, and it just gets more sketchy from there, because 3 nights after the accident, Connor's dad gets a call from Alec saying they need to have a sit down. So they both meet up at night in the empty parking lot of the law firm, and Alec turns off his phone, throws it in his truck, and says, I don't want you to think I'm recording you. They go inside, and he tells Connor's dad, pick any room. That way you know, like, I haven't bugged it. Why are you so suspicious of yourself? Like,
exactly. Now I think that you have bugged it after you said that you haven't. Like, I wasn't even going through my head at this point.
I know. So, after they pick their room, Alec says, I need to know where y'all stand. I can't mourn the loss of Mallory before worrying about what might happen to my son. And Marty, that's Connor's dad's name, says, well, I can't think of anything but the loss of this child. And later on, Connor goes up to his dad and breaks down in tears and said, Dad, are they going to try to kill me?
Like, he was being dead ass, too. Like, that was a serious concern in his life. And he was friends with the Murdaughs. So, like, he knew what they were capable of. It was, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Sad. So, at this point, it's 7 days after the accident. All the friends went to church with Mallory's family. And then they drove out by the bridge where it all happened. And a guy drives by in a truck saying, hey, they found her. And it was true. They did find her. Everyone was heartbroken. And Mallory's parents wanted justice and for the Murdaughs to not be above the law for once. They got a lawyer named Mark Tinsley, and he set out to find out what really happened and to prove that Paul was the driver. After some investigating, he finds that Paul went to a convenience store and bought $50 worth of alcohol with Buster's ID. That's his older brother, in case you forgot.
And don't worry, we'll get to him in a minute.
Yeah. They look alike. They're both just like gingers. So, I'm sorry, gingers out there. Y'all don't all look alike, but these two brothers did. Take my word. And Paul knew that there would be traffic stops that night, so that's why he was so adamant about taking the boat. Once everyone is together, Paul funnels 6 natural lights, and once they get to the oyster roast and leave there, his blood alcohol level is 3 times the legal limit. After the crash, there were around 20 different law enforcement officers at the scene, and not one of them put Paul in front of their car, because you know they have cameras on them, to question him. It's apparent that something ain't right, that they're protecting him. Because they know if they put Paul in front of those cameras and interview him and he incriminates himself, they're gonna have the freaking hellhounds unleashed by Alec. He ain't gonna like that. Which, why are you scared? It's just a dude that works at a law firm. That's it. But anyways. Michael Brock was assigned the lead investigator for the first 24 hours. And guess what? He had close connections with the Murdaughs. Anthony told Brock that Paul killed his girlfriend. Yet that audio recording is not in the evidence. Then there was Michael Paul Thomas. That was a DNR, the Department of Natural Resources agent, who had got Paul out of a lot of shit in the past because, shocker, he was Alec's brother's best friend. In the days after the crash, phone records show that Alec's brother John made numerous calls to Paul Michael Thomas. He also called Officer Pritchard, who was the officer at the hospital, trying to question the kids multiple times. And the nurses from the hospital said that it seemed like Alec was trying to manipulate the whole situation from the jump and wasn't worried at all about Mallory. Phone records also show so many calls from those agents working the case to the Murdaughs, but not any to Mallory's parents. You would think that it was Paul that went missing at this point.
Seriously.
So Tinsley hired a biomechanical engineer who is basically an expert in movements of the body and physics. He was able to take the positions of the people in the boat and the injuries they received and figure out where they were in relation to the damage to the boat and their injuries to find out who was driving. So Mallory and Anthony were in the back of the boat, and when the boat hit the bridge, the front went down and the back came up, throwing both of them out of the boat. Mallory received blunt force trauma to her head, causing her to drown. And then Anthony was just kind of thrown. Something happened to his shoulder. I think it got dislocated or something. And then Miley and Morgan were sitting on a cooler in the front of the boat. Morgan got thrown forward and her hand got crushed between the bridge and the boat. And Miley didn't feel too much of the impact. Connor gets thrown into the center console of the boat and suffers a laceration to his jaw and a fracture to his jaw. And the rod holders on the side of the console are broken where Connor was thrown into them. And Tinsley states that Connor couldn't have been driving the boat because he couldn't have broken those 3 rod holders, broken his jaw, and ended up on the right side of the boat if he was driving. So therefore, it is proved that Paul was driving the boat, and there were 3 charges against Paul: boating under the influence causing death, and 2 counts of boating under the influence with great bodily injury. And then it comes time to have a trial. But the 14th Circuit Solicitor's Office, 2 Beaufort County judges, and the Beaufort County Sheriff's Office recused themselves from the case because of their ties to the Murdaughs. Many were confused as to why Paul hadn't been booked into jail, even though he was charged and was facing up to 25 years in prison. And then Paul kept reaching out to Morgan, trying to manipulate her into getting back with him, but she told him stop messaging her and let her heal and cope with Mallory's death and wrap her head around the fact that you did this, basically.
There's no salvaging that relationship at that point. I don't know what he thought was going to happen there, but...
So 3 months after the accident, the Murdaughs were still getting special treatment. The first day in court, Paul had his mugshot taken with a fancy polo shirt on, and he never had to wear handcuffs. He never had to await trial in jail like a normal person. And of course, he entered a plea of not guilty. After the hearing, Paul moved into the family log cabin at Moselle, which is that big property they own. And in the 2 years till his trial, people would see him on Snapchat stories, and people were still going out there and hanging out with him, drinking with him, partying with him, as if nothing ever happened. And also during this time awaiting trial, Paul is still getting in trouble, like getting pulled over for speeding and such, because he still thinks he can just get away with anything.
He definitely did not learn his lesson. He literally killed somebody and still didn't learn his lesson.
Yeah. And around this time is when Buster gets expelled from the University of South Carolina for plagiarism.
That made me so happy when I heard that, by the way.
Bruh, you trying to be like all these men in your family, and you think you're going to get that way by plagiarizing? Okay. So Alec and Maggie are having tensions build in their relationship because Maggie began noticing bills were going unpaid, and it has been said that she hired a forensic accountant to help sort out their bills. Another rumor is that she visited with a divorce attorney. Oh, Lord. And then we get to June 7th, 2021.
So, if you thought that, I don't know, whenever I was going into the series and I saw the boat incident, I thought like that's basically what the entire show was about. Mm-hmm. And then we got to this day. And I was like, wait, what just happened? On June 7th, 911 receives a call from Alec. And he is reporting that apparently his wife Maggie and his son Paul had been shot at the family's hunting property.
Hampton County 911, where's your emergency?
This is Alec Murdock at 4147 Moselle Road. I need the police and the ambulance immediately. My wife and child just shot badly. Sir?
You said 4147 Moselle Road in Arlington?
Yes, sir. 4147 Moselle Road.
Stay on the line with me, okay? Yes, sir. Stay on the line with me, okay? Okay.
Kalan County Communications.
Carlton, I have an Alex Murdock on the line, caller from 4147 Moselle Road. He's advising that his wife and child was shot.
Okay, and sir, give me the address again.
It's 4147 Moselle Road. I've been up to it now. It's bad.
Okay. Okay, and are they breathing?
No, ma'am.
Okay, and you said it's your wife and your son?
My wife and my son.
Are they in a vehicle?
No, ma'am. They're on the ground out at my kennel.
Okay, and did you see anyone? Okay, is he breathing at all?
No, nobody.
Is she? Okay, do you see anything? Do you see anyone in the area?
No, ma'am.
So the shootings took place by the kennels, and Maggie was shot multiple times in the chest and back with an AR-15 style rifle and was positioned like she was trying to run away from someone. Paul was shot once in the chest, then in his neck and head with a shotgun, and it made him barely recognizable. Suspicions came about that the friends involved in the boat accident were involved in this double homicide, and they were questioned, but of course they were all in the clear. In the days after the double homicide, there were no leads, no suspect descriptions, no sketches, no vehicle to be on the lookout for. And yet, with all this lack of information, they felt confident to tell the community that there was no need to worry. Like, yeah, someone just went out on this big property and shot this mother and son dead, and nobody knows shit about it. But it's safe. Don't worry, no worries. Alex,
that is such an oxymoron in and of itself. Like,
I know. Alec's lawyer said he had an airtight alibi since he was visiting his parents. Because according to Alec, at 7:31 p.m. that night, he woke up from a nap. He didn't see Paul or Maggie, but it's a large property, so he didn't fret. He texted them that he was going to check on his mom and dad because his dad's health was declining and his mom had dementia. And he didn't get back to Moselle till 10:20 that night, and that's when he calls 911. Well, it later comes out that the Murdaughs owned the same kind of guns that were used in the murder. So that's when the spotlight was really put on Alec. Like, what the heck? Why was your wife and son killed with your guns? And I'm pretty sure to this day they haven't found those guns.
no, they haven't.
Which is sus, because also there was a part in that docuseries where there was like a local, I guess, that had a drone, and he heard that the property was being raided or had a search warrant, something. And with his drone footage, he saw, like, I think Alec's brother go out there to the property, and they were putting guns in his truck and just leaving while a search warrant was going on.
It kind of made me think whenever I saw this, and this is like kind of off topic, but is it like okay to just throw your drone and fly it over people's houses and take like footage of them? Like, I feel like they
have no
definitely wouldn't be
idea.
able to use that in court, and I don't know.
I have no idea, but Netflix was like, we're using it. We're
Yeah,
using
I'm
it.
super glad they did. I'm glad he did it too, but it was also
Yeah.
kind of strange.
Seems a little like invasion of privacy, but at this point, the family doesn't deserve privacy.
Agree.
Okay. So, while investigating the double homicide of Maggie and Paul, an anonymous tip was sent in that a crime from July 8th of 2015 involving the death of a guy named Stephen Smith should be looked into in relation to the Murdaughs. A 911 call came in that night saying that there was a man laying in the road, not moving. It was Stephen's body in the middle of the highway, and around the corner was his car. He had severe head trauma, and it was assumed at the time that he had had mechanical problems with his car or ran out of gas and was walking home.
He called his mom, or he texted his mom, and it said he was out of gas.
Oh, okay, so that was confirmed.
Yeah.
Cool. So, it was assumed that he was walking home when something happened to him to cause him to be found dead in the middle of the road. A cop that arrived at the scene said it didn't appear like he was hit by a car like many would assume. There were no torn clothes, his shoes were still on, and his phone was still neatly tucked in his pocket, and neither the blood pattern or the position of his body indicated he was hit by a car. It was suspected back then that foul play was involved, but guess what? No one dug any deeper. And then when this case was looked into again after this tip, it was noticed that Buster's name was in the report. And Stephen was in high school at the time, as well as Morgan, Miley, Connor, Mallory, Paul, and Anthony. They were all in high school at this time. And Stephen's best friend, Olivia, said he was such a funny guy. He didn't care what people thought of him. He was always just like dancing around and living life. And after he was found dead, the community all rallied around his family and support and wanted to help figure out what happened. But as time went on, the case went cold. His mom, Sandy, hired a private investigator named Steve Peterson to dig deeper. His first thing on his to-do list was to see all the work done prior to his involvement. In South Carolina, the Highway Patrol does all death investigations related to motor vehicle accidents. They interviewed lots of people, including associates of Stephen, his friends, his schoolmates, and family. But when anyone is asked what happened, they say, "Oh, I heard he was hit by a car," or "I heard it was a hit and run," and just lots of rumors were being spread. A lot of he said, she said. Other rumors were that 2 or 3 young men were in a vehicle attempting to mess with Stephen, and 2 of the men named that was involved in these rumors was Buster and Paul. It was also rumored that Buster and Stephen were in a little bit of a spicy relationship. Stephen was openly gay in a place that didn't necessarily accept that, and being gay in the Murdock family would have been looked down upon. And a major story going around was that Stephen and Buster were in this secret relationship and they were wanting to come out to Buster's family. And the night that Stephen died, he was on his way home from school and his car ran out of gas, and Stephen felt comfortable enough to call Buster for help. And Buster just so happened to be in the area on the way home from a softball tournament with his friend. It's believed that Buster picked him up and got a little ways down the road when something happened. The original case files were full of Murdock names, yet none of them were ever interviewed about it. And with all these rumors going around, Sandy Smith pleaded with the community to come forward with information if they had it, but of course, no one wanted to talk because of who was involved in the rumors. Even the media wouldn't mention the fact that the Murdaughs were repeatedly brought up and would only say a prominent, well-known family was rumored to be involved. Like, I can't imagine how defeating it must feel in that situation where you're trying to get justice, but if a Murdock is involved, good freaking luck.
Exactly. And as of just like 3 weeks ago, there has been a lot of updates going on with the whole Steven situation. So on March 9th, the Smith family, they launched a GoFundMe to raise funds to have Smith's body exhumed and independently autopsied. And within a matter of days, the fund had ballooned past its initial goal of $15,000 and currently stands at nearly $100,000. So they brought a lot of attention back into this whole Steven case, and Buster Murdaugh actually spoke out publicly for the first time regarding Smith's death. And of course, he said, "I unequivocally deny any involvement in his death, and my heart goes out to the Smith family."
You can tell by that vocabulary he went to law school.
Yeah, and they asked him about the Netflix and HBO shows made after him, and he called them baseless and defamatory.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, you're real hurt.
Now, I didn't see this, in the news. I did hear this from a coworker. But apparently, they said that when they did, the autopsies on Steven, it showed that he had been, sexually assaulted and sodomized with what they're assuming were baseball bats whenever all this happened. So take that with a grain of salt. I did hear it from a coworker. Haven't seen it in my own research, but if that is what's happening, then that is, yeah.
Damn. I mean, it wouldn't be the first time where a crime case occurred where there was a gay couple. One was open, one wasn't, and one was scared of coming out. And then that fear of being caught in that relationship then makes them do something atrocious to their partner.
Yeah.
100%. Seen it before.
And they said that the rumors of them being in a relationship had been a thing for years. So it followed him for a long time.
Rest in peace, Steven. I hope to God you get justice.
And I mean, this was as of 3 weeks ago. They had recent updates on that. So justice may be around the corner for him as well.
I mean, but he died in 2015. I don't know what exhuming the body is going to do necessarily. Unless he had blunt force trauma to some part of him. I mean, that's really the only thing a skeleton can kind of show at this point, I would think.
I don't know. After the way they recreated that boat crash, virtually using that simulation, I feel like they can do basically anything at this point. So
true. We'll see what comes of that. We'll update you on Instagram if anything comes out soon with that.
Definitely.
So, another thing that came up in the midst of this huge investigation was the death of Miss Gloria Satterfield, who had been working as the family's nanny, who we had mentioned earlier. In February of 2018, she had fallen down the stairs at their Moselle house and later passed away due to her injuries a few weeks later. It's important to note that really all the public knew at the time of her death was that Maggie made the 911 call and Alec said he was able to speak with Gloria, asked her what happened, and she said that she had been tripped by the family's dogs and fell down the stairs.
911, where's your emergency?
4147 Moselle Road. I'm sorry?
What's going on out there?
My housekeeper has fallen and her head is bleeding. I cannot get her up.
Okay, you said she's fallen. She's bleeding from the head?
Yes.
Okay. How old is she?
I'm not sure, 58 maybe.
Do you know if she fell from standing or not?
No.
Where'd she fall from?
She fell going up the steps, up the brick steps.
Okay, so she outside or inside?
Outside.
Okay. How many steps is there?
8.
Okay, is she on the ground or is she up near the top?
She's on the ground. She's on the ground.
Is she conscious?
No, not really.
Is she awake at all?
Yes.
Okay. Is she just not responding appropriately, but she is awake?
Man, she's not responding.
Okay, I've already got them on the way. Me asking questions does not slow them down, man. Knowing if she's conscious is one of the things that the medic needs to know if she's responding at all to you.
No.
Okay, so she's not responsive at all.
Well, I mean, she's mumbling.
Okay, so she is somewhat conscious. Is she breathing okay?
Yes.
Is she bleeding from anywhere?
Yes, her head.
Okay, are you guys able to control the bleeding?
No.
Can you
I
put
haven't
a
even
clean
tried.
rag or anything on it?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, is she bleeding from, like, her face, the back of the head?
I've got an ambulance coming. Sir, ma'am, what?
Where exactly is she bleeding from on her head?
I'm not sure. At the top of her head.
Okay. What happened?
She just fell back down. Can I get off this phone so I can go down there?
Can I have your name and phone number? Or are you able to bring the phone down by her?
What?
Or are you on a cell phone where you can walk down there and talk?
I'm on a cell phone. No.
Okay, can you bring it with you so we can ask her some questions about what kind of pain she's having?
Hello?
Yeah, can you ask the patient what kind of pain she's having?
Ma'am, she can't talk.
Okay, do you know...
She's cracked her head and there's blood on the concrete and she's bleeding out of her left ear.
Okay, she's bleeding out of her ear?
And out of her head. She's cracked her skull.
This was reported as a typical trip and fall accident, but interestingly, there was no coroner's report, no autopsy done, and it was later reported that she had died from natural causes. Then rumors began going around about the real cause of her death, and Alec did himself no favors because people noticed that he acted very weird around the subject. And according to Morgan, Paul took her death very hard and would cry and tell stories of his memories with her. When she heard that Gloria had tripped and had multiple broken ribs and a really bad brain injury, she felt in her heart that what happened to her wasn't what was being reported as a simple fall. Morgan also said that Alec was a very hard person to read, and at the time of Gloria's death, he was severely addicted to painkillers, and that Paul would stay with his dad at the Moselle property and make sure that he was detoxing. There was this time where Gloria had found drugs taped up in little bags under Alec's bed, and Gloria wanted to let Paul know because he seemed to be the only one that cared about his dad's health. And Gloria was afraid to go to Maggie about it, scared she'd think she was snooping around and lose her job. When Morgan and the Murdocks were leaving Gloria's funeral, Alec told Paul that he was going to sue himself for wrongful death and give her family the money. Because, interestingly enough, Alec took out a commercial insurance policy on the Moselle property a month before Gloria died on the property. So that's a little suspicious.
Why do people do that? We've talked about this on the podcast before. Why do you take out insurance policies on people you're about to kill, especially like 1 month before? Like, that's super common.
Yeah, well, at least this time it wasn't on the person, it was the property. But still,
okay,
it's sus.
Same difference, and then somebody just dies on your property a month later. Like, that should set off some crazy alert to insurance companies immediately, like where they start investigating it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, apparently, Alec went up to her sons at the funeral and was going to get them in touch with a lawyer so that they could get some money for what they were going through. And in a later lawsuit, her sons say they have no idea who this lawyer is. And this alleged man, Corey Fleming, happened to be a good friend of Alec. And Fleming reached a $4.3 million settlement with Alec and his insurers that were supposed to send out $2.8 million to Gloria's sons. But the sons said in September of 2021, they learned about this fee that they were supposed to get through the media. And, of course, they never got it. They never saw 1 cent of it. So that PI that Stephen's mom had hired, he contacted the caretaker of Moselle, Ronnie Freeman, to ask if he had ever heard the family talking about Stephen Smith. But Ronnie said no, but he did have information about Gloria's death. He said that Gloria usually showed up to the property around 8:30 a.m., and that day, he saw her walking up to the house around that time, and then he gets a call from Maggie 15 minutes after he sees Gloria. And she was hysterical, and he was like, what the hell happened? And Maggie says, Ronnie, you need to get here. Gloria fell. There's blood everywhere. And so Ronnie runs over, and Gloria was on the stairs with her feet above her head, just laid on the stairs. And the PI stated to him that the EMS report said that Alec talked to Gloria, and she told him that the dogs tripped her. And Ronnie said, ha, that's not true. He wasn't there. It was just Ronnie, Paul, and Maggie. Alec wasn't even there when the EMS left. So that whole story about the dogs is just a blatant lie.
Yeah, Maggie is a lying-ass bitch.
Yeah.
Every single member of this family is so messed up, I swear to God.
For real. Ain't none of them innocent. Should they all have died? Well, half of them died? No. But, holy hell, it's just a mess. It's unfortunate, and it's a mess. So, in the midst of all these deaths surrounding Alec, the law firm he worked for discovered that he was potentially misappropriating money from clients, and they called him out and forced him to resign. And the South Carolina Supreme Court eventually indefinitely suspended his law license. Finally, he ain't got a little bit of power.
And this is a big deal, because remember how he came from his family. Everybody in his family is a giant, long line of lawyers, and he's continuing the tradition. And if he loses that, it's like he loses his reputation. His whole life has revolved around. So, like, him getting stripped of that had to just kill him on the inside.
Yeah. And, oh God, as if it couldn't get any worse. On September 4th of 2021, Alec calls 911 again and says, I was on the side of the road fixing a flat tire and someone tried to help. And then instead he just shot me in the head.
Hampton County 911, where's your emergency? On Salkehatchie Road. Okay, what's the address on Salkehatchie Road? I'm by the church. Okay, what's going on? I got a flat tire. Mm-hmm. And I stopped, and somebody stopped to help me. And when I turned my back, they tried to shoot me. Oh, okay. Were you shot? Yes, but I mean, I'm okay. You shot where? Where were you shot at? Huh? Did they actually shoot you, or they tried to shoot you? They shot me, but... okay, wait, you need EMS? Well, I mean, yes, I can't drive. Okay. I'm seeing, and I'm bleeding a lot. Where part of your body? I'm not sure. Somewhere on my head. Your head? Somewhere on my head. Okay, and what's your name? I'm still here. I'm still on the line with you. What's your name? Alex Murdock. Alex Murdock? Yes, ma'am. And you see you were driving, you got a flat tire, somebody stopped to help you, and they shot you? Well, they pulled over, yes, ma'am, like they were going to help me. Okay, stay on the line with me. We're going to get some. I'm bleeding pretty bad. Okay. You have an ambulance coming, ma'am? Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Wait,
like,
I think
what?
you're too far.
So, I'm going to just leave that at that for now, okay? So, after this incident, Alec is airlifted to a hospital and the shooting is investigated. On September 6th, 2 days later, Alec goes to rehab for his addiction. And then about a week later, authorities provide new details that allege that Alec arranged for a man to kill him so that his son Buster could collect $10 million of life insurance money on Alec. Okay. And the man named Curtis Edward Smith is arrested on charges of assisted suicide, assault, and battery of a high aggravated nature, pointing and presenting a firearm, insurance fraud, and conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. The next day, an attorney for Alec tells NBC's Today Show that his client was depressed and attempting to get off an opioid addiction that continued to consume him in the wake of his wife and son's death. Believing his insurance policy had a suicide clause, Alec enlisted a man to kill him during a fake car breakdown. And then, a few days after that, Alec surrenders to authorities after he's charged with insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, and filing a false police report. And he's granted bond, but the judge orders him to surrender his passport, but permits him to return to the drug rehab center.
All right, so while Alec was in his Florida drug detoxification center, the justice finally comes and he gets arrested. But he was being charged with swindling millions of dollars from the sons of Miss Satterfield. And he was jailed in Richland County, South Carolina, and his bond was twice denied. And I got to see like the video of whenever they denied his bond, and it just felt freaking amazing. Because it was one of the first times that somebody told him no, and he just had to.
Yep. Then you really see a grown man want to cry.
Yep.
So on December 13th of 2021, a judge set Alec's bond at $7 million, and Alec also spoke for the first time publicly, telling the court that he had been going through opiate withdrawal in September when he sought to have himself killed. He said, "My head is on straighter and I'm thinking clearer than I have in a long, long time. I want to deal with these charges appropriately and head on." Okay. Whatever that means to you, sir.
So he was only charged at this point, really, with all the money stuff. But more indictments started getting made. So Mr. Murdaugh and Mr. Smith were indicted by the state's grand jury on 2 conspiracy counts, including a narcotics count related to the painkiller oxycodone, which we talked about earlier. And then he gets the other indictment, the one that was just really, really putting icing on the cake, and that was 2 counts of murder. Prosecutors were alleging that he fatally shot his wife with a rifle and his son with a shotgun, which before we had believed that this just wasn't possible, couldn't have happened, because he said that he had an airtight alibi. He was with his dying mother and father, or not dying, but health declining mother and father at the time. But some more details ended up coming out. And did you see the audio on the phone?
The Snapchat video?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So, like 10 minutes before the murders happened, there's a Snapchat video on Paul's phone that was saved. And even though you don't see Alec in the video, you can hear him talking, and it's clear that that's definitely him. And so that just goes to show that he definitely was not where he said he was at that time.
Yep. There was also, like, a whole lot of talk about the shirt he was wearing at the time during the whole trial. And this shirt been analyzed for, like, some kind of fluids. I guess they were trying to find, like, blood splatter. Cause,
like high velocity splatter, something like that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. High velocity impact splatter of some kind of fluid places Alex at Moselle when the murders occur. I just somehow picked that one sentence out of all my notes. So, like, because I guess in their mind, he admitted to touching the bodies to see if there was a pulse. So you would expect to have blood on your shirt. But if you shoot someone close range, you have these, like, little specks of, like, blood splatter. So I guess that's what they were ultimately looking for. And I feel like that's what this high velocity impact splatter of some kind of fluid is.
And let's talk about, like, what that suggests. So if he did kill, which he did, his wife and son, Paul's was shot with a shotgun. And, like, so badly, like, his entire face and body was dismembered. And then Maggie was shot in the back to where it looked like she was, like, running away from something and she was, like, gunned down. Like, think about your husband or your father putting you through that in your last few minutes.
The only thing I can rationalize in my brain is that Alec was just so, first of all, high on painkillers throughout probably for years.
Yeah,
and
definitely through it for years.
The hatred he could have felt towards Paul for putting his family in the spotlight and in such a bad way after the boating accident, I feel like that could have made him resent him and maybe like Maggie was like, I don't know, on Paul's side more than Alec's. I don't know. There's really no way to rationalize what happened, but
I think it comes down to one of those classic like family annihilator situations. Like he found himself in such a horrible situation, and the only way that he thought they could get out is of just wiping things clean and starting over. And I don't know.
And what's also interesting is a lot of phone calls between Alec and Buster have been released from the prison. And it's like he is still trying to manipulate people inside of the prison and gamble and like get people money in there. And he's just still being a little bit slimy.
But what I really liked about this trial was every like crazy lie manipulation that he's weaved from the very beginning. Even if you look at when he was talking to Connor and trying to coerce his dad and like by calling him too early, and like he was trying to control every situation, and it just got all undone right there in front of him, and he had to just sit there and be proven wrong in front of I don't know. That was just because he was such a control person. Like nothing can touch me, and then he realized, hey, you can be touched.
Yep, and you can also be sentenced to life in prison without parole.
Which he was 3 consecutive sentences to be carried out back to back to back.
And y'all, by the time all of this was said and done, he faced, I lost count after 84 criminal charges.
Yeah, because after all the other crazy stuff they got on there, he also got 9 counts of tax evasions. And a couple other ones as well, because they just kept finding more and more stuff.
Like
and I'm sure if you dig even deeper...
computer crimes, conspiracy to commit X, Y, and Z crimes, like almost every crime in the freaking book.
And what I wonder, and what's weird to think about is, I wonder how many things he got away with like before this that we're not going to find out about, or how many things he covered up for his kids. Maybe even if they're not like murder crazy, but like, there's a lot more.
Oh, hell yeah. It'll be interesting because I feel like now that he's locked up in prison for life, I wonder if anyone else will come forward and be like, y'all should look into this one. Y'all should look into this.
Yeah, I feel like they probably will, especially with all the attention it's been gaining.
Hell yeah. That's pretty much the whole fricked up story of this whole Murdock situation. And like we said, it's definitely a wild one, and it's a confusing one, and it's a like, why did this have to happen one? But here we are.
I was just so flabbergasted. I hate that I just said flabbergasted, but the entire time that I was watching it, like every single time a new murder or something would happen, like it starts all with the boat and somebody's missing, and then the housekeeper falls down the stairs and dies. And then the wife and the son end up dying. And then he gets shot on the side of the road. I was like, this is just getting more and more insane with every second.
And I remember as this was all unfolding in real time, I would see the headlines in the news and I was like, damn, this family is just everywhere right now. And I just didn't ever really look into it. But I kept noticing like, damn, again? What the hell? But
I, of course, live under a rock and hadn't heard about this story until like 2 weeks ago.
Meanwhile, every morning I wake up and I check the news. Well, not the news, but, for some reason I'm a sucker for Snapchat's Daily Mail. I'll just get on there and like swipe through all the stories real quick every morning just to get a gist for what's happening.
Yeah.
Hi. Well, I guess we're all donezo with this. But to end this dark episode off, we have a bit of exciting news. We're gonna have a special little, I don't know, giveaway, I guess you could call it. So we're gonna do this thing. If you leave us a nice review about how much you love the show and send us a screenshot on our Instagram or Facebook, Twitter, whatever, saying that you've done so, we're going to send you a free Southern Woke sticker. So, if you love us, you can so easily show your support by leaving that review, and we will send you a sticker to show our love right back to you.
Absolutely.
Yep. So, be sure to do that, and in the meantime, till the next episode, you can follow us on our Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, all of the things. And we will see you in 2 weeks.
All right, later, y'all.